Well, today we're going to talk about what a real cowboy thinks of the show 1923. This is kind of an in-depth. I'm going to do it in 3 parts: what I like, what I don't like, and then kind of a general overview of the show and what might be coming up with it. So this is Calabar right here. I'm Trinity, and I'm just going to tell you my opinions while we go for a little ride up here in the mountains of Montana. This horse is pretty young yet, or not super young, just kind of needs some riding, that's for sure, before this summer when we can. I got this handle here. If I can ever get a hold of it, this is what it's called, a sissy strap or a night latch, and it gives you something to hang on to because this horn's too big, so you can't grab onto this, but you can hang on to this. A horse can travel at a lope, or let's say a run, for a very short period of time, but a horse can travel at a trot for miles upon miles. So if you're wanting to cover some country, learn how to ride at a trot for long ways. And we're in Montana, and this is April. There's quite a bit of snow left in the draws and up in the mountains especially, so can't ride way up there, but we can go down across the prairie. As you can see, last year was a hard year. This doesn't have much grass on it, and what there was we had to graze off because there just wasn't enough to sustain anything. On a young horse like this is a real spooky horse, so I got my hands on 2 reins here. That way I can turn him this way if I need to, turn him that way if I need to, for a real good stop, because if a rabbit jumps out in front of you, or he decides a bush is all of a sudden a spookaboo problem, he could go flying sideways, and that would be really hard to ride. So you got to be prepared for everything. Whoa, whoa, good. Now when I get on, I want to be careful on this horse. He bucked me off once doing this. So you want to get on watching him and making sure he's paying attention and I'm paying attention. I don't like getting bucked off, and it broke a couple ribs when I did it too. Antelope up there. There's a train coming too. Got to get over this. Got to watch him in here. There's antelope, there's train, and there's a big red sign, so there's a lot of stuff for him to watch. We'll take it slow and let him watch it all. There we go. Make him watch the train. Doesn't seem to care about the train too much. To keep him back into a trot a little bit. He's actually slowing down on me. I'm just having to keep him going here a little bit. There's a bunch of elk standing up there. You probably can't see them, but they're right there. There's a bunch of elk. There's a pile of them. And nothing can be really up in the mountains up there because there's too much snow, so they're all down in this stuff, way out in the plains. So 1923 has really sparked the imagination of a lot of people, and of course it's an offshoot off of Yellowstone, which brought to light the lifestyle of ranching in Montana. And 1923 just goes back to a different time period when this same family from Yellowstone, the Dutton family, near Yellowstone Park is ranching and the stuff that they had to deal with in that time frame and that era. I know it's a very popular show, but what are a couple things that me as a cowboy in Montana, which is where this is placed and based on cowboys, really likes about 1923? So a couple things I like about the show 1923 right off the bat, which the ladies might not say the same thing. One of the things I appreciated was Spencer and Africa. Now, that's coming from a guy, obviously, and a guy who has read a lot about the early time periods in the early hunting periods, really, in Africa. I've read a lot about Courtney Salou and a lot about from Peter Capstick and people like that who were early hunters and later hunters in Africa, and a lot of that is really close to accurate as well. So I really enjoy that, him hunting lions and the leopards and being out there, and then being at the Norfolk in Nairobi. That was a very classic historical jump off point for all the hunters that came to Africa, things like that. So I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really cool. He's really wanting to go home. This is how he bucked me off the last time. I had him turned the wrong way. When I got on, I spooked him, and he decided he could start moving. So I'm trying to make him go sideways to where home is. Kind of makes him so he can when I get to this road, I'm going to make him trot so he doesn't keep him away with him. Walk down this road nice and slow. He has to go back home slowly. It's very important for these younger horses to learn that they can't run back to home or try to buck you off when you make him walk, which is what I think he did. When I got on there, he started running because he's spooked. And then I grabbed him, and I didn't have this bridle on, so I didn't have enough control. Never thought he would buck. And when he spooked, and then he decided he was headed home, and he just bucked. So he did it more on purpose than I thought. A little more comfortable now. I trotted him for about 2 miles there, across this wide open stuff, and he had to go sideways to where the house is. So that forces them to have to do what you want to do. If you're going directly away, sometimes they think, I don't know, they view it differently as going sideways to where they want to go. So if you make them go when the house is off to your right or left, and they have to keep going straight, it's very, very good for their mind to know that you're controlling them. He thought about trying to buck again. I mean, he thought about spooking or something. I don't know what he would have done, but he thought about being an idiot and trying to run back home. And that's one of the things you really got to watch when one of these horses does something, like when he bucked me off in the mountains doing this same thing where I was out by myself and he thought he could get away with it. Now it's in his mind that when you're by yourself and he gets on there and you're pointed back home, I might be able to get away with going back home. So you got to be really watching that in case he tries to buck again, because he got away with it once. I mean, he got away with it totally because he broke my rib, and then he was 7 miles away. So there's no way I could get on and ride him again. You know, that's the best thing, is riding back up there again the same day if that happens. But you can't when your rib's broken. Another thing I like about 1923 is the Montana thing. And some people are upset because they're in Montana, they're bringing a whole bunch of people here and all that. And, you know, I see it as a good thing because they're promoting the ranching lifestyle in a way. And you know, that's something that doesn't get done a lot. So now there's a lot of focus on cowboys and ranching in Montana. And as much as ranchers don't like that, that's what they need. They need some promotion of the industry to be able to make a living with it. To make money, you got to have, you know, it helps to have a little promotion going. So no, don't. He's trying to be weird. That's just a tractor. Yeah, that's just a tractor. You don't need to be stupid about it. Yeah. I think he's seeing the tractor way over there at the house. See that? but he doesn't feel tight. When you're riding a horse enough, any horse, you can tell when their back is tight. When they're thinking they're gonna act stupid, you can kind of feel it on them. They have a. That doesn't always mean that they won't buck now. I mean, so I have one rein loose and one rein tight. So if he goes to bucking, I'm gonna jerk back, and what that's gonna do is turn him. But I can feel he's pretty loose now. So if he bucks now, it'd be completely on purpose. But when they're thinking about doing something stupid, you'll feel all the muscles under your saddle bunch up. They're just like tight, and you can tell they're thinking about doing something stupid. And I hate that feeling. And that's when you got to turn them in some circles and get their mind on something else somehow, so that they don't actually do what they're thinking about doing. You may not be able to ranch for real in Montana, but now you can ranch in a digital way. Go to CattleKings.io to see my upcoming Cattle Kings game, where you can become a rancher in a digital universe. Out now are cattle cards, which are actually seed cattle. And what that means is the game will start at a certain date in the future. And when it does, only the people who own the seed cattle can start breeding cattle right away. So if you have one of these cattle cards when the game starts, you're going to be able to go onto the game and generate that specific animal. And then you're going to be able to breed the cattle that you have to create new cattle NFTs, which you then can sell on the marketplace to new players coming in. New players have to purchase cattle from you to start the game in the beginning. So it's a huge benefit to have one of these seed cattle. So go to CattleKings.io to find out more. I'm gonna have to stop here. That gate might be wide enough, but I'm not sure it's wide enough for me and my horse and my legs. So if he decides to run through that thing, that's gonna really hurt. So I better get off here. Whoa. Okay, so let's see how much room I would have had. We'll kind of see how much room I would have had. No, I don't think I would have fit through there. Ooh, man, let me see. I should fit through here. Saddle. I'm gonna do this so he doesn't rip my stirrup off or something. Yeah, I mean, my legs would have made it, but barely. Not enough room for comfort, that's for sure. All right, I'm gonna get back on here. Whoa. Now he feels a little tighter again. So when you first get on or something, I don't know. This will deter him a little bit because it doesn't have any shoes on, so walking on the rocks is always pleasant for him. And he's starting to relax a little bit, but for some reason he tensed up again when I got back on him. Not liking that. See, when I'm doing this, instead of just riding down the road, I'll put a little pressure on him. I'll make him kind of zigzag and stuff, so that you're not, you're actually teaching them to be light instead of just walking. They get kind of bored and they can kind of walk slow and not learning a dang thing. Another thing I really like about 1923 is how they portray some of the ranching issues that ranchers really do have to deal with. And one of them is bankers. I mean, in the show, he has the place still paid off, so he doesn't have a mortgage. But most of the time, you as a rancher, you have a mortgage, or if not a mortgage, you have what's called a line of credit. And a line of credit is where the bank takes out a loan on your, as collateral on your place. So if you don't pay it back, of course, they're taking your property. But also, a line of credit means that you're always running in the red. It means you're borrowing to operate on for that year. So you're borrowing to live for that year, and then you make enough money to pay off the loan and redo the loan. And that's what most farmers and ranchers do nowadays. Back then, there was actually a lot of bankers that were able to manipulate people to get the land. So they would take out a loan, either a mortgage or a line of credit, let you buy a bunch of calves or cows or something with that money, and then they would call in the loan early for some reason. They put in the paperwork that nobody noticed, and so they could actually say, oh, well, you didn't pay it back, and make sure that they couldn't pay it back when they called in the loan, so they'd steal the property. And kind of shows, you know, the banker is not willing to extend anything more to the Duttons in the 1923 show. And I think that, you know, that just brings another thing to light that ranchers actually do deal with all the time. I think they do that in Yellowstone as well. So now let's move on to some of the things that I don't like. Okay, what are a couple things that I don't like about 1923, the show? Well, number one, and you guys are going to probably guess this if you know anything about me, is the smut. So there's a lot in this show that you have to fast forward. A couple episodes, you had to fast forward most of the episode. There really wasn't any storyline. They just made a couple episodes longer, or made them episodes at all, by putting a bunch of nudity and sex in there that didn't do anything for the storyline. So I didn't like that at all. I would say it's far from kid appropriate, not even really adult appropriate in that way. And then you have the F word all over the place. Now, I was talking with my wife, and I was saying, man, I don't even think they used the F word back then. So I looked it up, and actually the F word came into being in like 1500, but it wasn't really widely used because it was taken out of the dictionary, and then it started to be used as a derogatory term and a cuss word. And then in the time period of 1800s to 1923, I guess it was used pretty often as a cuss word. I did not know that, so I thought, wow, I thought they were trying to be authentic, and that's not authentic, but maybe it is. Now, do you need the F word in it to make the show what it is? I honestly don't think so. I think you could make the whole show without one F word in it, and it wouldn't take anything away from the show. You could take the nudity out too. Wouldn't take anything away from the show. So what they're trying to do with that, in my opinion, is they're Hollywoodizing it. Did the same thing with Yellowstone. In the first couple episodes, they did a lot of nudity and everything, and I think that they believe, which may be right, I don't have a clue, that you can get more viewers if you put a whole bunch of smut in the thing first, and then they kind of actually lightened up on that stuff later on in Yellowstone because they have a storyline, they have people following it. That's just my opinion. I think that's a stupid way to do it. Sorry to say it that way, it just is. And I really don't like that. Now, a couple more things that I don't like about the show, but they're just kind of nuances. One of them is the horses. Love the horses in the show, but are they really real? I mean, who has horses like that? Those are, I don't know, each horse in there has got to cost $20,000 minimum because every one of them is so broke. It's unreal. If you look at any of Charlie Russell's paintings or Will James stories, and look up Will James, when the cowboys were riding horses, they were riding, I mean, this horse here, I mean, I've ridden him for a year, and he's still, you know, today, he was kind of iffy in a couple of spots. And I put quite a few miles on him. Back then, they didn't even try to break him. I mean, this horse has been worked on the ground and you know, trained to turn and all that. Back in the Old West, the cowboys, they would just rope a horse out of a pen. You were given a remuda, or a string, I guess, out of a remuda. I'm not sure which one. Anyway, you'd pick out 5 horses, right? Or the rancher would pick out 5 horses for you, and you would ride those 5 horses. But they weren't broke. You just had to get on. So they would just run them in a pen. You'd rope them. You'd saddle them up. Usually had to tie a leg up because they didn't even know what a human was, you know. Tie a leg up, blindfold them, saddle them up, and then they would get on and somebody jerked the blindfold and away they'd go. Some of them would absolutely buck like crazy. Some of them would run right across the pen and smack right into a fence. They'd try to jump out of a corral. Wild, wide open stuff. And then once they quit bucking that first time, they were considered broke. So they didn't know how to turn, they didn't know how to stop, and they would just open the gate and away they'd go and go do work on them. You know, go rope a wild longhorn steer out in the middle of a prairie like this with a huge bit and a horse that doesn't have a clue how to even do anything. Now that's real horses in the Old West. Now what they're riding is modern day super horses. Okay, I know this is kind of piddly, but I think it'd be fun to see something that was a little bit more like that. Now you're not going to get Harrison Ford to ride one of those broncs or idiots or whatever they are called, those horses that are wild son of a gun horses that aren't really trained, but that's what the cowboys really rode. In fact, there was a guy on every ranch. It was called he rode the rough string. You did not want to ride the rough string. The rough string was the bad ones. Like they were the horses that nobody else could ride. They bucked every time, or they had some major problem that made them really hard. Some of them like were really good at bucking. So there was certain horses that cowboys that were like cowboys in the old days, they would literally get sick the night before thinking about having to ride that horse the next day. And when they would get on, a lot of them horses, those really bad ones. So a lot of those really bad horses like that, you couldn't get off of. I mean, it was really hard to get on them. It took them like 5 cowboys, one holding the ear down, you know, blindfolded and everything to get on. And so out on the range, they couldn't get off, or the horse would either totally break free and leave them there, or they couldn't get back on them. So they would literally, once they got on a bad horse like that, they would just pee down their leg. I mean, they just planned on never getting off that horse until the end of the day. Now that's one thing that I really don't know how you would ever portray that in a show like 1923 or any show. I mean, the reality of it would probably kill a few people, because it often did. The real thing often did kill them. And the horses weren't that broke. Every picture you see of Will James and Charlie Russell, the horse has got a huge bit in his mouth and is going like this. They weren't really broke, because when you break them like that, you know, they just knew how to go. They didn't really have any brakes or weren't really trained. They were just broken. So that's the difference between what I see in 1923 in reality in that. And that's just one of my pet peeves. So overall, I really like that Hollywood is trying to portray the cowboy and the rancher in a different light. I think they make it so ridiculous with all of the smut in there that you can barely watch you really can't watch it, but I do for purposes of this. And other than that, I think it's really good to bring to light real Western stuff. So I'm looking forward to some new shows that take what Hollywood has done in Yellowstone in 1923 and 1893. 1893 might be even better. Take what's in those shows and really make a really good storyline without the smut. I mean, don't make a cheap soap opera one for, you know, the Hallmark Channel. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about really good, high quality series, but without the smut. And that I could go for all day long. So anyway, that's my short review of 1923 and what I think about the show. If you have any comments about that, or if you think I'm right or wrong on any one of those points, feel free to comment down below and follow his channel for more of this stuff.